Hello everyone and welcome to the last game we'll be showing from round 3 of this year's Norway Chess. Fabiano Caruana versus Arjun Erigaisi. Fabiano, both of them basically with 1 win and 1 loss. Both of them defeated Wei Yi. Fabi lost to Hikaru and Arjun lost that beautiful game to Gukesh. And now they're facing each other. So let's check it out. It's an amazing game. You guys will enjoy it. Let's dive straight into it. Fabi with white opens with pawn to e4. And after that, we're going to check out the standings after round 3. And also, well, some changes in ratings in the World Top 20. e4, we have e6. Arjun goes for the French defense. We have pawn to d4, pawn to d5, and knight to c3. And usually bishop to b4 is played. This is the winner variation, but sometimes players do go for the classical variation, the classical French with knight to f6. And again, bishop g5 is continuing the classical, but Fabi opts for the Steinitz attack with pawn to e5, knight f to d7, and now again f4 is the pretty standard idea. f4 c5, then knight f3, knight c6, and you pile up on the center. But here after knight f to d7, Fabi goes knight c to e2, and he played it instantly, saying that yeah, I knew you were gonna play the French. Obviously I prepared this. And Arjun strikes with pawn to c5, and okay, you do lose the tempo here by moving the same piece twice in the opening, but you get to play c3, and now you have the strong center for as long as you want, or rather as long as black doesn't play pawn to f6. So knight to c6, and now we have pawn to h4. There are some games where, for example, pawn to f4 was played, knight to f3. Basically all of the moves that white play are aimed at maintaining the strong center. And there's even a very nice game. Magnus Carlsen defeated Laurent Fressinet with knight to f3 here in the Paris tournament it was a blitz tournament in Paris in the Grand Chess Tour in 2016, amongst other hundreds of games. But here pawn to h4, and although pretty standard in any position to play h4, in this particular one it is now as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. Burning no time on the clock, so Fabi again well within his preparation. And Arjun strikes with pawn to f6. The engine says it's sort of an inaccuracy. Maybe, in this particular position, fighting for the center with queen to a5 would have been better. But, I mean, we're on move 9. We're on move 7. What does the engine know? So pawn to f6. And now, again, you'd expect Fabi to strike with pawn to f4. But no, Fabi goes knight to f4. And this is where things get very, very interesting. Arjun could defend the pawn on e6. He could play something like queen to e7. But no, he just plays c captures on d4. Again, pretty much instantly, saying that this is not news to me. I know everything I'm doing. Knight captures on e6, and now he goes queen to b6. We have queen to b3. Both of them, again, spent, Fabi spent 5 minutes, Arjun 2 minutes. D captures on c3, B captures, and now both of them want the other guy to capture the queen. If you capture here, then black gets the open A file. If you capture on b3, then white gets the open, or rather the semi-open A file for the rook. We have queen to a5, now putting pressure on that c3 pawn with maybe some ideas of d4, but also knight to d4 might be a very tricky line if at all possible. E captures on f6, we have knight captures on f6, now attacking the knight, and knight captures on f8. And here, okay, rook captures on f8 was played, and this is the first time where Arjun really burned some time. He invested 18 minutes in this recapture. Why would you spend 18 minutes? Was he thinking of king captures on f8? Not really. He was thinking of knight to d4. Is it a possible idea? I will show it because it's really brutal. The engine says, okay, both of the moves are very nice, but knight to d4, good luck calculating this because the queen is hanging, and also knight to c2 check if the queen loses control over the c2 square. So you have to play queen b2. It's the only move that doesn't lose on the spot. Now bishop to f5. Again, you control that c2 square. Knight to e6, and basically you have nothing better than to capture on e6. You capture on e6, and then the game continues. What's interesting is that if you insist on knight to c2 check, then you will even lose the game. And let's just see why. King to d2, knight captures on a1, and you'll play knight captures on g7 check. The problem is the bishop on f5. King f7, knight captures on f5, and now even knight to e4 check, king to e1, and knight captures on c3. looks like, you know, good stuff is about to happen, but queen captures on b7, and within a few moves, black will get checkmated. King g7, pawn to h5 check, king captures on f5, queen to f7 with check, king e5, and now let's say queen e7 check, king to f5, g4 check, you force the king down the board, and queen to g5 checkmate. So, you know, it's only one of the lines, but I just wanted to show you what happens if you, you know, go knight d4 and then you maybe even, you know, overpush or white overpushes. It's a pretty cool line. So that's why Arjun invested 18 minutes here. He had to calculate all of this. He played rook captures on f8, and now bishop to b5. Okay, now Fabi gets at a moment to get the bishop into the game. Knight to e4 puts pressure on f2, so knight f3, and queen captures on c3, trades queens. We have captures, and pawn to a4. We have pawn to a6, trying to get bishop to capture the knight, and so Fabi does. We have captures. This improves Arjun's pawn situation in the center, but it also leaves the isolated a pawn. And okay, it's a pretty interesting endgame. Bishop to b2 was played, knight to e4, and now just castles kingside. And now if you look at the position, okay, the material is equal. Arjun has 3 pawn islands, Fabi has 2 pawn islands. We know that almost always it is better to have 2 pawn islands because it's just easier to pick off pawn islands than, you know, when you have one solid pawn island. And on the other hand, there's this monster bishop on b2. The light square bishop on c8 is also very nice, but for the moment, not doing all that much. However, it is Arjun who has 2 connected pass pawns. So it's definitely a trade-off. You could prefer any, you know, both white and black here. Let's see what Arjun does. He could defend with rook a7. There's no reason to give up this pawn, but he does it anyway. Pawn to c5. He says, okay, you burn time. I'm just going to start advancing my passed pawn, and you have the pawn here. If you capture, then I might play something like rook g8, and then the bishop is attacked. You know, you might attack it again. Bishop will move. You're going to play bishop to h3. And yes, you can still defend everything with something like knight to e1, but that's a passive knight, that's a passive rook. I mean, that's a passive position, and those pawns are marching forward. Like I said, objectively, it's a draw, but objectively, everything is a draw. So rook f to e1, and now bishop to f5. Again, offering the pawn. Again, no one is interested in that pawn. Rook a to c1, king to d7, and knight to e5 with check. We have king d6 and pawn to f3. Arjun has to move the knight, and knight to f6 is the safer retreat, as it also prevents any bishop captures on g7 in the future, but he opts for knight to d2. Okay, rook c to d1 and knight to b3. We have pawn to g4 by Fabi, bishop back to c8, and now knight to c4 with check. As the d5 pawn is pinned, king to c6, and finally bishop captures on g7. And what can Arjun do? The problem is now rook f7 runs into knight to e5 check, and you lose the rook on f7. You could opt for a passive defense with rook to g8, but then still knight to e5 check. Okay, you get the knight into the game. You've lost the pawn, and it will be Fabi who's pushing. But I guess Arjun was fed up with playing passively. He wanted to play actively. He played d captures on c4, and he sacrifices well, the exchange. Bishop captures on f8, and now knight to d4. Or maybe it's not even that. Maybe he just overestimated his position. He probably thought, okay, I can, you know, with a monster knight on d4, I can probably just hold this. And he is absolutely right, except if Fabi plays one particular idea. So have at it. Pause the video and win the game for Fabiano Caruana while I give you a couple of seconds. The only move that wins the game is rook to e8. And you know, you probably thought, okay, c2 is coming. If c3 c2 happens, then black is all right. If knight captures on f3, then it's fine. But you know, you play something like rook to e3, maybe that prevents both of these ideas. But then bishop captures on g4 opens up an attack on the bishop. You lost the pawn, and black will have enough resources to draw this game. With rook to e8, you stop all of that. Now knight to f3 is absolutely pointless. You just get the king into the game, and the black cannot develop. So the only thing is to play pawn to c3. Now again, if pawn comes to c2, it's going to be a pretty good position. So rook c1, Fabi gets the rook into position right on time, and now bishop to b7. Offering a trade of rooks, Rook captures on a8, and now knight to e2 with check. Here, Arjun wants to eliminate the rook from c1 to somehow advance that past c pawn to victory. We have king to f2, knight captures on c1, and now rook to d8, trying to get the rook back to help out with the sort of against the advancement of the c pawn, and here pawn to c2. And interestingly, again, we have a position where only one move wins for Fabi. Have at it. Well, I give you a couple of seconds. The only move that wins is bishop to h6. King to g2 is nice, but bishop to h6 is the only winning move, as you are covering the queening square, and you will even give up this bishop for the pawn because your passed pawns will be much, much stronger. So here, knight b3, we have pawn to h5. And the problem is now, yes, you can win that bishop, but that's all there is. G5, G6, H6, and you can't get your pieces into the game. You can't go with the knight. The bishop cannot enter the game. The king cannot cross. So this rook is just splitting the board in half, and white is just dominating here. So after H5, we have pawn to C4. Arjun will get that pawn as close as possible to the queening square before he queens the pawn, and then he's going to try to quickly queen again. We have bishop to f4, king to c5, and bishop to e3 check. King to b4, pawn to g5. Now Fabi will create a passed pawn on the king side, c3, and pawn to g6. We have h captures, and now a very, very important move, pawn to h6. Again, the only winning move for Fabi. I thought about making it pause the video moment, but, you know, if I made it, I'm sure you guys would figure out, okay, it's not h captures on g6, but we still can show. The problem with h captures on g6 is that after knight to d2, covering the queening square, you don't really gain anything. For example, pawn to g7 is just winning for black because you will get a queen into the game, and that's it. So what you will have to do here is rook captures on d2. So if pawn captures, you will capture with the bishop and cover the queening square. And if c1 queen, you don't care. You're just going to give a check and pick up that queen. So you're going to have to go for captures. And after bishop captures with check, king captures on a4, g7. And the reason why it's not working now for white is that there's bishop to d5 covering the g8 square. So that's why you don't want to pass the g pawn, you want a pass h pawn, so that at the end of that line you have h8, not not g8 to queen the pawn. So of course h6 by Fabi, and now c1 queen. Now the same idea no longer applies, as you've seen why. So pawn to c1 queen, we have bishop captures, knight captures, and now rook to b8, pinning the bishop, and that, or rather skewering the bishop, and that's all there is. Not much more that can be played here. Knight e3 check, king to e3, and he was in this position on move 44 that Arjun Erigaisi resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Once you advance the pawn, you will capture the bishop with check, king a3, and that's it. You're going to play rook to c7. Yes, you will pick up the rook, but after captures and captures, there is no stopping the h-pawn. Even though you're up a piece, you're going to lose the game very, very convincingly. So yeah, Fabi wins his second game, and that means that for the standings, Fabi is now the leader after 3 days of Norway Chess. Fabiano Caruana is leading with 6 points, Magnus Carlsen second with 5, Hikaru and Arjun splitting third place, Gukesh currently in 5th with 3 points, and Wei Yi currently last with 2.5 points. And what does this mean for the live ratings? Let's check it out. There are some changes. Okay, Magnus winning a little bit of points. He's still #1 in the world. Of course, Hikaru winning some points, then losing some points. Now, again, on 2803. Very close. If he loses a game, he will go down below 2800. Fabi shuts up 2 places, so he overtakes Arjun and Gukesh with this victory. Fabi, new world #3 on the live ratings. Arjun, Gukesh, Nodrbek also lost some points, but still convincingly in the top 10. Pragnananda, Alireza, Nepomniachtchi, and Wei Yi dropping to world #10. Then we have Aravind Chidambaram, Anish Giri, Shahriar Mamedjarov, Wesley So, Vishwanathan Anand still very strong, world #15. Levon Aronyan, Vladimir Fedosev, Leinier Dominguez Perez, Hans Niemann, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, and former world champion Ding Liren, currently world #21. So yeah, you know, quite a lot happening. You know, sometimes nothing is happening in the world top 20. Now we have quite a lot of stuff happening, so I thought, you know, best share it with everyone. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Now we've seen all of the games from round 3 of Norway Chess, and you know, if unless there's something happening, you know, that prevents me from showing them, I will show all of the games from every round, because here in Norway Chess, every round is decisive. There are no draws, and unless it's an absolute snooze fest of an Armageddon, I will probably show all of the games. So I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Nidi Kumar, Marcus Shib, Marius Klimek, Juan, and Robert Aratun for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.